Hi guys, how's everyone doing today? So today I'm going over Mercury's transit and its debilitation sign of Pisces from about February 27th of 2025 to about March 15th, right? Now, March 15th, it's not actually out of Pisces yet, but it starts going retrograde. So I'll make a separate video then, right? And as you guys may have noticed, I'm in a different background and I haven't made a video in a few weeks. I haven't been home or had my stand with me, but I was able to finally pick up my stand today. So more videos coming soon. Okay. And for those of you guys who have been around for a few years, you might recognize this background from like early 2022. Okay. Anyways, so Mercury's debilitation transit in Pisces for about 2.5 weeks. Okay. Now, the first thing you have to notice is the interesting planets that it's conjunct with in Pisces, right? So first, Mercury, while it's debilitated, and Mercury gets debilitated in its opposite sign. Okay, so it's like, you could look at it as a little bit of extra intense, right? Mercury's the only planet that gets exalted in its own sign. So it's the only planet that gets debilitated in its opposite sign, right? So there's a certain, you could view it as a con that I'll discuss in a second. But so it first runs into a lovely Rahu in Pisces, and then it runs into a Venus that is getting ready to go debilitated. But by the time it crosses it, that Venus will already be debilitated. Right now, Venus, you might think, oh, Venus gets exalted in Pisces, right? Yes, it does. But for those of you guys who watch my other videos, you know that a planet, when it is exalted but retrograde, it has a almost debilitation-like effect, which I will discuss soon as well, right? So you have Mercury facing these two challenges, which I'll discuss right now, okay? So we have Mercury, right? Mercury is what? You can basically sum it up as a planet of rational intelligence, right? Now, it gets debilitated in Pisces. Why? Because Pisces is the sign, you could almost say, of getting lost, okay? So when your rational intelligence is lost, very free-flowing, you could almost say out of control, not structured, it's not really that good, right? You can see how this can arise all sorts of undesirable results in your real life, right? Imagine when your just rational intelligence is not there, okay? Now, there is a certain time and place for this. This is why God has, every planet go through every sign, right? Because no matter how unfavorable or favorable certain transits may seem, they all serve a purpose, which I'll discuss in a second. But you can see here that Mercury, the rational intelligence, when it is debilitated in Pisces, it's your rational intelligence is not as focused, right? And each planet governs a different energy. So when this planet of rational intelligence, that's the energy that it governs, when it's not focused, it's not that good, right? It's usually not that good. Now, the first thing here is that it runs into a lovely Rahu, okay? Now, Rahu, we know, is the planet of illusions and all this kind of stuff. It's not really a great planet in general. Now, you have this Mercury who's already feeling a little bit lost, and it's running into a Rahu, right? Have you ever felt a little bit lost in life and, you form a friendship or you get close to somebody, even an intimate relationship with someone who's a bad influence, right? It's usually not the most ideal situation, right? You could almost look at it as that here, right? Mercury, it's usually very smart, right, and rational, and then it's a little bit lost, it's a little bit confused, doesn't know what to do, and then it runs into this Rahu, right, who's trying to deceive him, right? So you can see how this is already not the hottest start. And I'm going to discuss in a second more detail, but let me just set the story here, right? Because the story is very important. Most people, they like to just, like Google, certain like effects like Mercury, Rahu, and Pisces or something. But you have to, when it comes to multiple planet conjunctions, especially when like one is retrograde and stuff, and it's in, one of their exalted signs and one of their debilitated signs, it's important to really understand how the energies actually mix rather than just trying to memorize a bunch of facts and kind of put things together non-energetically, okay? So you have this Mercury. It's feeling lost, confused, and it runs into a bad influence, right? And then after a little bit, it runs into Venus. Now, usually, a planet, when it's debilitated, when it runs into another planet that's exalted in the same sign, it helps out, right? It doesn't cancel out the debilitation or any of this nonsense, but it usually helps. For example, let's just assume Mercury ran into Venus in Pisces. And pretend there was no Rahu either. Let's just assume Mercury was just regular debilitated, and then Venus was not retrograde. So it was just regular exalted in Pisces, right? So now you have this you have this Mercury who's feeling lost, right? And then this Venus, well, first of all, why does Venus get exalted in Pisces, right? Venus gets exalted because Venus is a planet of enjoyment. So when you're just lost in enjoyment, you could almost say from a spiritual perspective, that's the most elevated place the planet can be, right? Have you ever been lost in enjoyment? Maybe with like your spouse or your partner or maybe your friends or something, right? It usually feels pretty good. Pretty good, you can say, right? So you can also pretty much apply that logic here, right? Venus, when it's just lost and it's able to enjoy however it wants without any sort of constrictions. I'm not going to say without any sort of constrictions, but when it's just allowed to be free, right? And you can just enjoy and let loose, right? That's where its prime is, right? So let's just say a debilitated Mercury in Pisces meets a exalted Venus in Pisces. So the Mercury is like, oh, I feel lost and confused. And the Venus is kind of trying to, you could almost say like, be its friend and say, hey, hey, I know you're lost and confused, but look at the bright side of life, right? Look at all we have to do and stuff like that, right? Imagine, just like how I gave the Rahu example of like, let's just say you're Mercury and you're lost and confused in life and you run into a bad influence. Imagine Venus is like a very, I'm supporting is not the right word, but imagine it's a very fun to be around friend, okay? It helps, right? It's not going to make your whole life better, but it helps. And that's kind of how this would work here. Now, the thing is though, your Venus here is retrograde. And the scriptures say a planet that is exalted but retrograde behaves almost like it's debilitated. I forget the exact wording that they use, but it doesn't just turn debilitated, but it kind of gives debilitated effects, right? I made a video about Jupiter debilitated versus Jupiter retrograde, and I discussed this whole thing there if you want to just understand the concept a little bit more. But so Venus here, right? So we know it gets debilitated in Virgo, right? Because imagine Venus is trying to enjoy, and Virgo is all about kind of like, structure and things like that. So imagine you're not able to enjoy like the way you want to let loose. Imagine there's like a certain, like a regimen that you have to follow to enjoy, right? It's not really that good. But when Venus is, and then I just explained the Venus exalted in Pisces, but now, sorry, give me 1 second. But now if Venus is retrograde, right? The retrograde kind of hyper focuses the planet's energy in a certain direction, right? You can almost, let's just say in 2 seconds, I can sum it up like that. So if Venus, for example, is debilitated and it is, and I'm taking a long time to go over this because it's super important to explain this. So that way, when this transit happens or other planet transits in the future, you can, put the pieces together a little bit more easily. When Venus is in Virgo and it gets, it gets debilitated, right? But when it's retrograde, in the focus of Venus, the enjoyment kind of gets like hyper focused in a certain direction. Now this Virgo energy actually helps it, almost giving you like an exalted like thing. Imagine a retrograde Venus, it's like, oh, I have to do this. Like I have to enjoy in this way or this person. That Virgo, that structure will be like, yeah, we're going to make it happen, right? And then you can kind of see how that helps the Venus, right? But now the opposite happens here in Pisces, right? Let's just say the Venus is trying to let loose and relax and everything, and then the retrograde is like, dude, no, we have to do this, right? It's like, oh man, do we really like have to do this? Like so you can see how it's kind of like a buzzkill for Venus, right? I'm gonna move forward because the video is about Mercury, but I think you guys kind of get the point. So now the Mercury, it passed the Rahu, the bad influence, and now it approaches its friend Venus, right? Who's kind of trying to be free flowing, but it's like, oh man, I have to do this, right? So the Mercury, it's not like it's meeting another debilitated planet, but it's not getting the same exact exalted effects from Venus in regards of letting loose, right? It's kind of, in when they kind of get closer and closer to conjunction in this fashion, both of those effects will kind of rub off on Mercury, right? The letting loose part, and then the I have to do part, right? And I'll explain how this all comes together now. Okay, so you have this Mercury. It's feeling lost. Let's just say this transit lasts a little over 2 weeks. The first week, it's kind of going to be more of the Rahu part, and then the second week, it's kind of going to be more of the Venus part, right? But in both, like in the first week, the Venus will also kind of influence, and then the second, the Rahu will also influence the second part, right? So in general, we know that Rahu and Venus both are trying to strongly gear the Mercury in a certain direction. Okay, we know Rahu is all trying to play all kinds of tricks, and we know Venus, it's retrograde here, right? So it's kind of hyper focusing itself in a certain direction, right? Now this is where you also have to look at the story here a little bit. So Mercury, what does it govern, right? One thing we could say it governs is career, right? And Mercury, it just came from Aquarius, where Saturn is, right? So let's just say hypothetical, and Saturn also governs career, right? Let's just say, for example, and it was in Saturn's sign, so the frustrations and things like that is very strong, and Saturn's kind of in the second half of Aquarius, right? So let's just say here, let's just hypothetically say, you could possibly feel some frustrations in career, right? Now, when it gets to Pisces with this Rahu and Venus, so the Rahu is rubbing off on the Venus, and the Venus is rubbing off on the Rahu, right? Now, Venus is what? All about enjoyment. So when this Mercury, let's just say you're Mercury, and you're coming in here with these two together, you could possibly feel like, oh, like this is just I'm just giving it a hypothetical just to kind of get the balls get the ball rolling in your brain, not get the balls rolling. You could kind of feel like, oh, maybe I need to detach from this to enjoy more, right? Maybe I need to quit my job. Maybe like something like that, right? Like, I'm not saying you're going to necessarily quit your job, but I'm saying you could get these kind of thoughts, right? Oh, maybe I need to, anything that involves letting go of something that Mercury governs in order to achieve something that Venus could provide, right? Like, I would let go of my job so that I can get more money somewhere else, right? Or that because, yeah, I let's just leave that. Let's just give that example for right now. I don't need this video going on all night. But yeah, you can kind of see. So both the Rahu and the Venus, they're both trying to strongly steer you in a certain direction, right? So my one thing here is, and Mercury's already not in a hot spot. Do not make any strong, big decisions, okay? Because they're both trying to steer you to, and we all know what happens when we try to seek more and more enjoyment, right? Or more and more satisfaction and things like that. It's a never-ending thing. So don't try to do that here, right? At least until Mercury goes retrograde, then that's a completely different story. Which is why I'm making a separate video on that, because I think you can see how all these things they play together, but one little thing changes, and boom, it's a completely different story. Okay. Like if Venus wasn't retrograde, I'd be probably giving you a little bit of a different story here. Now, another thing. So don't make any big decisions here, okay? You can let them cross your mind, and now I'm moving into the other part. So God obviously put Pisces in the universe for a reason, and it put Mercury to go through Pisces for a reason. It didn't just say, hey, Mercury skips over Pisces every time. It didn't do that, right? There's a reason, and there's a certain benefit of all the planets going through the certain signs, right? So sometimes your mind, it needs to let go. Now, in this fashion, it isn't a really hot spot here, right? Because you're letting go, and it's already hard enough to let go, which is why Mercury gets debilitated in its opposite sign. But then you have this Rahu, who's like a bad friend, and then you have this Venus, who's like kind of like a friendly friend who's just like in a bad place right now, you could say. So, yeah, in general, yeah, that's kind of why I said to not make any big decisions, because you're being influenced by the bad friend, and you're kind of just being influenced by like a fun friend who's just not really in a right place right now, and he can also kind of rub off on you to try to seek certain stuff that you think is okay, right? That you think could be even benefit you. But we could also use this as an opportunity to detach from the mind, right? And we know how important that is, right? In general, okay, we have a hard time letting go of our patterns of, egregious overthinking, right? Now, when I say let go, I don't necessarily mean letting go of just letting go of random stuff. No, I'm talking about like superficial things or whatever. I'm talking about letting go mentally from your rational expectations, your rational plans, your stuff like that. Now, this doesn't mean, okay, I had a plan to, work hard and get promoted at my job, and then now I'm just going to quit so I can maybe just find it somewhere else and get rid of all the problems that I want to. No. But let's just say you have a problem at your job, right? How this transit could affect you is hey, let's just quit and find something else and blah, 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 right? But what you could do is detach possibly from your expectation that you need more money to be happy or satisfied or take care of yourself, right? Because Mercury is always trying to plan and, for your survival and things like that. So maybe you can detach from that. Just detach from your expectation that I need more money to survive or to have a happy life or a healthy life with my kids and family and stuff, okay? Or detach from your relationship expectations, right? I need, instead of, possibly coming up with some plan to find someone else or something, you can possibly detach from whatever it is that this person has that you don't really want, or that this person is lacking that you desire. Detach from that to, it's a great time, because like I said, this transit is strong. So the stronger it is, the more an extreme it's trying to pull you. That's just how it works. So in this situation, you can detach from a lot of mental stuff. Now, I always say detaching in my videos, right? But the more extreme the transit is, the more the extreme route you're gonna be geared to go. You're either gonna be geared to go in the first extreme route, I'm not saying you're gonna quit your job, but you're gonna have all these thoughts racing through your head about this. What you actually do is a lot of the times depending on your dashas and your natal placements and things like that, which that's another conversation about how to tie the two together, the transits in. Or you can steer towards the other direction. Hey, all this is going on in my head and stuff like that. And this is a great opportunity to, just deal with it now, get the mental gunk and clear it out and all this kind of stuff. And I'm in a much lighter place, which is what Pisces is trying to do, right? So it's up to you, whatever you want to do. I'm at 20 minutes. I don't need to. I can keep going on philosophically for, many days almost, I feel like. But especially since I haven't made a video in that long. But that's it for this video, okay? If you have any questions or comments, as usual, let me know in the comment section or email. And until next time, I'll talk to everyone later. Thank you all very, very much for watching.